demanding that petrol prices and electricity tariffs be cut. Otega Ogra is a senior special assistant to Nigeria's president for digital communications, engagement and strategy. Joins us now from the Nigerian capital, Abuja. Is anything happening to try and address the concerns and demands of these protesters?
Good morning, Aisha. Thank you very much. The president actually spoke, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu spoke to the protesters and the Nigerians on Sunday. And it was very clear. He's a very listening president. He's willing to listen to the demands of the protesters. But it's also important to note that this is the protest that said they are faceless, as the case may be. So it's been pretty difficult, understanding what they actually want. Notwithstanding, the government has also realized that, yes, and the government at various times come out to say, we understand that people are going through a rough patch. But this rough patch is necessitated by certain things that happened in the past. For instance, we got into this administration started in May 2023, at the time when Nigeria was spending, almost 97% of its revenues paying debt. At the same time, we had a huge fuel subsidy bill that, we were loaning money, we were borrowing money to actually pay for the subsidies. It was unsustainable. If we had continued those subsidies, for instance, which the previous administration didn't budget for beyond when the president stopped it, by law, we couldn't have continued the subsidies beyond when it was stopped. And if we hadn't removed it, Nigeria would have had a situation where we couldn't pay staff salaries, government employee salaries. We couldn't have invested money.
Tell me, have his solutions and the policies that you speak about created more problems for people?
So you saying it's created more problems is subjective. You cannot build on a base that is not stable. You need to stabilize the foundations. You need to, put the proper frameworks in place for people to begin to feel the benefits. On the top level, yes, the economy is already recovering. We are saying the data does not lie. It's very clear. Government aggregated government revenues is risen, by almost 100% from where it was last year. In the first half of this year alone. But it will take some time for that to drill down to, the entire populace. However, the government has also put in place, certain temporary measures from, importing new mechanized equipment for farmers to, introducing things like the student loan to take away the burden of paying for school fees from, the general populace and their parents. So some things like that, and also temporary food palliative measures have also been put in place, which is based on the National Social Register.
Can I ask you how? But can I also ask you about how the government has been responding to these protests? There is concern about that because there is a history of clamping down on protesters in the country, and rights group Amnesty International has said that the authorities should investigate what has been happening. They are very concerned about killings that have taken place.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting point that you have raised historical data. Prior to the protest starting, the government and the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, actually said, and I quote, Nigerians have a right to express, their constitutionally guaranteed rights to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of engagement. But also in the same vein, we also know that the military, the police, and other law enforcement agencies have, shown particular restraint.
But more than a dozen people were killed when security forces opened fire. More than a dozen people were killed. That's not restraint, is it?
In the past, we have seen where, yes, so I would say there have been isolated incidences of, brutality in some cases. However, that's not going to be condoned either by the president or the leadership of our law enforcement agencies. The Nigerian Human Rights Commission actually released, an advisory to all parties prior to the protest. We do not want to curtail the rights of any Nigerian and every Nigerian to protest. But in the same vein, as much as the government is permitting you to exercise your right as guaranteed by the Constitution, your rights to protest must not infringe on the rights of every other Nigerian to go about their legitimate
Will the killings be investigated then? I mean, will there be an investigation into what happened?
Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is not going to condone any, overhanded, actions of any law enforcement agent or agency, as the case is, or maybe, and every single infraction will be investigated by
well,
this
thank you
government.
very much for taking the time to speak to us. Ortega Ogra, Senior Special Assistant to Nigeria's President for Digital Communications Engagement and Strategy. Thank you for joining us from Abuja. Well, we go now to Democratic Republic of Congo. A ceasefire deal between government and Rwanda has collapsed shortly after coming into effect.